Greetings, everyone. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you all for joining us at this time. My name is Dr. David Fakunle, co-founder and CEO of Discover Me, Recover Me. And right now I'm joined by my good brother, friend, and colleague, Dr. Lawrence Brown, who is director of the Black Butterfly Project. Lawrence, it's always great to talk to you, man.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Yeah. So this opportunity is just a moment for us to have a conversation, and hopefully, my other colleague, Reverend Katrina Huffman, will join us shortly. But the genesis of this time right now, this chat, was really my reflection on what's going on right now. Uh, a lot is going on right now. Give me 1 second. I think. Yay! What's up, Katrina?
How y'all doing?
Good. How you doing? So, everyone, this is Katrina Huffman, Reverend Katrina Huffman. And Katrina, we were just getting started. I was just saying that the genesis of this chat amongst us was just a reflection on the moment. 2020 has been a mother. You know what I mean? We've experienced a lot, and the reason we're all connected is because we all engage in activism. We all are committed to some aspect of social justice, the social good. And as we continue to learn and teach and hopefully activate people in the work that we do, we realize, and have realized even before now, how heavy it is, because we are becoming privy to just the inner mechanisms of society, the inner mechanisms of humanity. And unfortunately, a lot of it is very ugly. So I wanted to have an explicit conversation of how we navigate that reality of the work that we do, even beyond work, a life's calling for many of us, and still maintain our emotional and mental health. And I think in the moment, I thought by now we would have known who the next president of the United States is going to be. We have our inclinations, but it's not official yet. So a lot of people are still dealing with high anxiety, and it's not being helped by the fact that we see certain people in this country who are stoking that anxiety in a very dangerous way. Let's keep it real. So for people who have been activated this year, let alone us who have been activated for many years and have been well versed in this work of activism, I guess the question is, and before you answer the question, please introduce yourselves and tell people about who you are and what you do, and how you engage in activism. But let's talk about the moment right now. How are you navigating this moment personally, and juxtaposing that with the activism that I think for many of us has been heightened because of this year? So, Lawrence, you can go first.
All right. Good day to everyone. I'm Lawrence Brown. I am currently the director of the Black Butterfly Project. I'm writing a book actually that's coming out in January. It would be called The Black Butterfly, The Harmful Politics of Race and Space in America. And I'm very excited about folks having a chance to check that out. And I, talk about a lot of the issues that are going on right now. I think in terms of like how I'm personally navigating it, it's been a hell of a year, like you said, man. Like, everything from Breonna Taylor to Ahmaud Arbery, from George Floyd to Jacob Blake. Not to mention the previous 5 years. When I lived in Baltimore, and you start with the death of Freddie Gray and the uprising there, and I say, Ferguson and Baltimore were really the canaries in the coal mine. It turns out that our cities were actually a prelude for what was getting ready to come. So in some ways, I personally have been dealing with the anxiety, the trauma, the stress of navigating the politics of an uprising since 2015. That the Baltimore uprising turned my life upside down in some good ways, some bad ways. But I think, that's when I think I had to start wrestling with the anxiety in a serious way. And the anxiety really was, watching what was happening with the police and the kids who were getting out of school at Frederick Douglass, and watching at my computer at my office, the kids threw rocks at the police threw rocks back at the kids, and then they deployed tear gas. And it was like at that moment, it was like I wanted to be able to do something to help, and I couldn't in that very moment. And so I think that's where I think I could pinpoint like that specific moment as one where my anxiety, I didn't know at the time, I thought it was like maybe a heart attack or something like that. So I was running to my provider like, hey, y'all need to check me out. I'm too young to die. And I'm thinking I need to see a cardiologist. And after a couple EKGs and visits, they were like, no, you don't need to see a cardiologist. You need to see a psychologist. And I was like, anxiety, panic attack. Again, deriving from wanting to do something in the moment to help Black youth, and then not being able to do so because it's happening on the screen. So I'll stop there for now. But, so therapy, I think, has been probably strategy number one.
Got you. Katrina, how about yourself?
Listen, I feel you, Lawrence. I get it. My name is Katrina. To everybody who's watching us, welcome. David, thank you for having me on your program.
That ain't my program. I'm a guest too.
I'm just speaking it in
I appreciate you, of course.
So to those who are watching, what I do is I'm blessed to be in a full-time capacity in ministry, and I've also been afforded the opportunities this year to be involved in a lot of different transformative justice coalitions around voter education and mobilization, and very graced to have fellow alum from the State University of New York at Binghamton join me in a couple of efforts around voter mobilization and education. And I think with the results we're seeing now, we realize that grassroots activism definitely pays off. In terms of how I'm coping, so I worked the elections on Tuesday, and I don't think I turned on the news since Monday night.
Good for you.
Last night I took a peek. I took a peek last night, but I only peeked for 45 minutes and I went to bed. Part of how I've been dealing with the COVID crisis and the racial unrest is to make a determination that I want to do something with the time that I have. Listen, COVID is like a microscopic terrorist that can creep into your window and up your nose or in your eyes or in your ears and either take your life or compromise your life. And it made me rethink a lot of things that I was prioritizing. So like today, I'm joining you from Binghamton, New York, because it's my grandnephew's 3rd birthday. And as soon as I'm done with this, we're going to go rip and run in the park and have a good time. And then tonight, I'll go ahead back to my ministerial duties at the church that I serve in. Finding that balance has been really important to me. It's something that I never prioritized as much before as I've prioritized it since February or March of this year. I do believe in serving other people. I do believe in going all in for other people. But also what COVID has done for me and the racial unrest has done for me is to prioritize the souls in my sphere, the souls in my network. And I no longer send people to voicemail as an example. I used to hit that button to say, send the voicemail. I no longer send people to voicemail. It feels cruel in a time when it's not that I'm realizing that you may not see them tomorrow. That something could very well happen to them, either again COVID, or they could be at a protest and not return home. Right? They could get stopped by a police officer and get shot in the back and be paralyzed, or be shot and killed, or die in police custody. I mean, those realities have really settled with me in terms of so that's being with people around me is a part of my self-care, right? Gotcha. Then the other portion of it is staying true to myself and staying true to the people around me. I mean, it's being an ear for people. Folks need to be heard, and that's what I've committed to do in these very, I know we've overused this word, but it's true, but in these unprecedented times.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think for me, I don't know if I necessarily needed 2020 to know how important it was to recommit to not just myself, but my family, that sphere around me. But it's certainly driven the point home, as I'm sure it has for a lot of people, with these things that we have compromised so easily before. But now, as you described, and I think that's a perfect way to say it, a microscopic terrorist. And then we have this larger system of terror. Let's be real, we're all people of color here. This larger system of terror that we operate in, it really has enforced the importance of appreciating the moment. So we call that mindfulness in the mental health space. And that's what it is, appreciating the moment for what it is. When I think about the work that I do and you know, Katrina and Lawrence, you know this, I call myself a mercenary because I operate in multiple spaces. So I can easily bounce between the academic space to the artist space to the activist space to the policy space a little bit, probably more the politics space. So I am not even knee deep. I am neck deep, fully submerged in this work. And I know for me, with the approach that I take, using arts and culture, Black arts and Black culture, because I was exposed early to these inner mechanisms of how this country works and how the systems of oppression work, not to say that it's made me numb, but I think it's prepared me more than anything else. So I think about 2015 too, Lawrence, and I remember the Saturday before things really jumped off. I went downtown and marched with people, and it was not so much to have my voice heard, because I understand my privilege. My voice will be heard in many spaces. I didn't need to march, you know, downtown up, or what's that, Pratt Street to be heard. I wanted to experience the moment, because for me, you know, despite being a Black man in the United States of America, I can't say I've had too many experiences where I felt oppressed. So a lot of what I know exists is because I know it exists. I've had some experience with it, but not a lot. So to be at an opportunity to really be a part of a huge moment was something I didn't want to miss. So I remember walking with people and really just observing. I didn't say much. I just wanted to see this outpour of, like you said, rage, anger. We all had those, you know, Trayvon Martin, you know, Michael Brown. We were all mad, but we were, you know, mad in our homes or maybe mad in our neighborhoods, not mad, you know, at the center of the city, bringing things to a halt, like, you know, like happened in 2015 and much of what we've seen in 2020 to a larger level. So for me to have that experience of group anger, group rage, group resistance was a moment I didn't want to miss. And I think for me, my mindfulness is of those people, those activists, those protesters who need that moment to get it out. Catharsis. We talk about catharsis, and it looks different, many different ways. So I empathize with protesters who do it for no other reason than this is a public space where I can get out my anger, my rage, my pain, my trauma, things like that.
Right.
So turning to, and again, this is an open conversation. This is just a time for us to talk. So I think one of the things that's really coming up now, if we're fast forwarding to the moment we're in, is this realization that despite how we think this election is going to go, there's another truth that has been solidified, and is that a large portion of this country believes in an alternative reality. It sounds, I don't know how else to put it, that despite clear evidence to a truth, they just flat out reject it, or at worst are okay with it. So for us who are in activism, who I think in our heart of hearts believe in the greater good and believe in humanity, but yet we have this clear-cut example to the contrary, how do you think you'll navigate that moving forward? Because I admit this is something that I'm struggling with right now. I know what I said in 2016. Oh, this was a fluke. You know, oh, maybe this is an opportunity to reach across the aisle, as they say, to hear their story, so forth and so forth. Fast forward 4 years later, I'm like, screw their story. You know, it's like they had, you know, they, you know, and I have to say they, almost as if they're an alien species. They had their chance to prove to me that they were human. They didn't take it. So why should I care? You know, so how are we navigating that, you know, thought process, whatever the case may be, because I'm still trying to figure it out.
You know, David, I asked the question, is it really an alternative reality? Or is this something that was simply baked in to the country? You and I know, based on national documents, it was baked in. The Constitution, etc., has all the Declaration of Independence. Black people particularly have always used it as the launching pad to argue for equity understanding we weren't baked in, but we just simply said we started from the bottom. Now we're here, right?
Yeah, you're right.
You are going to have to confront your hypocrisy. We have always been a moral representation, a moral voice for the nation to say, since you put those words in place, right? Even though we had come to this country not as slaves, we became slaves. When we came to this country, we were known as chattel and property. And then when freedom occurred, we decided, listen, here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to be written out of the nation we helped to build.
Right.
So again, I asked the question, and this has been our argument from the beginning. We've always resisted ideas and ideologies that seem to excise us from the promise.
Yeah,
I think we lost
what it's always been.
I agree. Yeah, Lawrence, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, and with what the good Reverend just said, I think about what's been salient for me in this moment is like the whole prospect of Afrofuturism, because it's like, how do I see a way out of no way, in a strange land? And I think Black people have always felt like aliens in this country, that this is a reality that's not for us. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, like it's this place that's alien. We are the humans trying to survive this, science fictional violence that's been exacted against us. And so I think, Afrofuturism, as the writer Isaiah Lavender III talks about in his book, is actually something that, when the first slave ship arrived in America, those Africans had the dream of a future where their descendants would actually make it. And so you actually start seeing, the Underground Railroad has to be one of the most powerful examples of Afrofuturism ever. The audacity to believe that you could make it through slavery and escape from this totalitarian white supremacist construct, and you track that through, abolitionist movement, the Civil War, Black men joining the Union Army, Harriet Tubman joining the Union Army, Black people serving as cooks and domestics once they escaped the Confederate plantations to help the Union Army create a future where Black people could become citizens, and only to face a tremendous white lash and lynchings and white supremacist terrorism, and then to envision a future beyond that, to create the civil rights movement, the Black Power movements, only to face another white lash, Reaganomics, the Southern Strategy, Nixon, the law enforcement acts that helped suppress the urban uprisings of the 60s and early 70s. Right. We had to envision a way out of that. So then hip hop emerges, the Black arts movement emerges to try to make a way out of no way. And now here we are again, we had 8 years of a Black presidency followed by the white lash of Donald Trump. And we're living in this white lash, this moment. And so it's, again, how do we make a way out of no way? How do we envision a future where we're going to be healthy and whole? And so Afrofuturism, I think, is doing that for me. And it's, that's why you see behind me, the Black Panther and, the T'Chaka, and these representations of a different alternative reality. This reality is the one that I think has been a material hell for us, but we've always sort of imagined and then created, based on that imagination, something different, something new that allows us to survive and then thrive.
No, that's awesome. And
Can I just add something to that, bro?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add to that is Black people have always been a moral witness in this country of not just the hypocrisy that of the historical documents and the founding principles of the country, but also the promise of it. And I just want to say that in everything that we have done heretofore, it has always been in stark contrast to what was imagined by the founding fathers, right? But whatever we have done in this country, in my opinion, in my estimation of history, it has always taken it further, farther, and better. But again, with that moral witness, two people I want to bring into the conversation, I think that's very important to acknowledge, and just how Black Christians particularly have been used in this way. Gabriel Prosser and Denmark Vesey, right, were insurrectionists, but they were insurrectionists with a moral purpose to say God did not make us slaves. You made us slaves. God made us free, and we're going to fight for our freedom, whatever it takes. You know, Frederick Douglass, another moral witness, and so was Ida B. Wells, and so on and so forth. So whether or not, I don't take issue with the word imagine, not at all. I'm just simply saying that we were always the visionaries for what America could be, and more so than the people who were entrusted to be involved, which were white male property owners, right? Their vision was narrow, and for a narrow group of people. But you look at Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, Christians like Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells, Maria Stewart, and David Walker. You know, read the David Walker's appeal, and they always hold up the biblical standards for freedom, and are preaching. It was preaching to an America to be what God has called you to be. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not necessarily all for the American brand of Christianity, but I am recognizing through history how many people, Black people particularly, who were a moral witness of the promise of America. And we continue to be that, even in our cultural representations, we continue to be a moral witness.
No, absolutely. And Lawrence, I'll quickly go back to you explaining Afrofuturism, and I never thought of the historical context of Afrofuturism. So I never thought of the Underground Railroad as Afrofuturism, but that totally makes sense. This idea of making a way out of no way is a beautiful way to really conceptualize how Afrofuturism has been a part of American history. And going to what you just said, Katrina, this idea of being a moral witness. I know that, I know from the history that I have learned throughout my life, that story of always seeing the best for what this country can be and demanding it as best we can with whatever capacity we as Black people in particular have had. And I think, bringing it to 2020, I'd like to say that there seems to be an even greater chorus of people who are now singing for that moral compass, that moral fiber in this country. And going to what you said again, Lawrence, the white lash. So now this is our moment of experiencing white lash. So our parents had their moment, our grandparents had their moment, our great grandparents had their moment. Now it's our turn. And one thing that I've noticed is the transitions that we're seeing. So John Lewis, transition. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, transition. Almost in this exact moment when we felt we needed them the most, it was their time to go. It's almost if to say, now it's your turn, and we're not going to give you an excuse not to deal with this process in your way. So as we continue to see, despite the white lash, and it's, for me, I'm glad it's there. I'm glad to now know exactly where to look to find it, to bring it out in the open. And if 2020 has revealed anything, it's that, Katrina, you and I, and Lawrence, you and I, we know it's always been there, but there are so many people who, if they did not see it, they would not know. And now they've seen it, so now they know. That's a big first step into ultimately, again, manifesting, Katrina, that moral fiber that we as Black people and people of color have always pushed for and been the vessels for. And not to say that white people have not, but it has been particularly our calling, I think, more than anybody else, because of being strangers in this land. So how do we... That's a lot. That's a lot for people, and I'm looking at the chat, just waiting for the questions, just to explain what's Afrofuturism. What's being a moral witness. I haven't seen them yet, but for people who are listening to where do you even start to tap into your ability to be a moral witness? Now that sounds very human, so maybe that one shouldn't be so hard. But how do we continue to activate the spaces and the abilities, and imagine, and I think that's an ideal word, imagine how we best exude that witnessing, Okay, somebody's with us so far. Good. We ain't lost you. All right, good. So how do we exude that witnessing that we can do from a moral platform? And how do we elevate, yes, in our context, Afrofuturism? We can say, the futurism of Latinx, the futurism of the Asian population, the futurism of the indigenous population. So I'm sure they all are feeling like strangers in this land, even those who are in this land and have always been in this land. Because of the systems that we're talking about. So how do we bring up our own futurism, but also elevate the futurism of others who are suffering right along with us?
For me, I'll just say it's just seeing everybody as the souls that they are, right? Souls are uncolored, right? Souls are not racialized. Souls are not sexed, right? But just connect with people for who they are, where they are. And I think part of it too has to do with stripping away from how we were taught to define people, right? Because even baked into the definitions of people is a sense of this belongs, but this doesn't belong. Mm-hmm. Yet everybody is breathing God's air. And COVID, I'm very clear on who gave the breath. These people are all breathing God's air. So who am I to define what your encasement means and what you deserve or don't deserve? Mm-hmm. That's kind of like where I start, is seeing humanity for who they are. And from my faith perspective, my Christian perspective, as I understand, that no one make themselves come alive in the morning. God gave them this day. Mm-hmm. Who am I to restrict what they can achieve in this day or in this time? I'm just as frail as they are, in that I cannot determine my own steps. I cannot determine my own idea of breathing day by day. I hope I don't sound too mystical, because I'm not trying to be that. I'm just simply saying that working with other people is simple for me, because everyone, as long as they're breathing God's air, deserve equity and deserve to have a space in this world that God made. So that's how I view it. And I don't care if you're Asian, like those are all labels we give, right? For the most part, they give themselves other labels, but we give labels, because a part of the capitalist structure is define who's deserving and who isn't. But when I center the fact that all men are souls that belong to God, it just takes that away from me in so many different ways, and causes me to want to work on behalf of everybody, and to really work against the definitions I was taught to believe, the social constructions I was taught to buy into, and to use as a superstructure for human interaction. I think working against that is going to be the promise of not just America, but the promise of humanity.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, Katrina. And I think one thing that I heard in what you just said was what we all have been taught to believe. So I know in the last several years of my life, and particularly as my public health career has, generated and blossomed and all that kind of stuff, I've had to unlearn a lot of things that I thought I knew for the longest time. And it's been tough in the sense that, because I'm in the background of mental health and psychology was my undergrad, I know how our minds think to a certain extent. And I understand why we subscribe to heuristics, those mental shortcuts, because to consider all the possibilities of humanity will make our brains explode. So for almost our own sanity, it helps us to have as many shortcuts as we can. But now we're running into the point where those shortcuts are leading to tangible, and have led to tangible disadvantages and tangible oppression, quite frankly, because of those same heuristics, those same mental shortcuts we are naturally, to an extent, inclined to use. So finding that balance between not making our brains explode, but being open and appreciative of all the possibilities of humanity, I think is, like you said, a daily process. And every day that we get a chance to go into that process, I think is much appreciated. So really quickly, I see some questions that I want to honor. So one of the questions I see is someone talking about inner work not being linear. So speaking on mental health, and we talked about spiritual health and physical health, and how do we find spaces that combine all of those necessities for those realms of health. So I'm really trying to make sure I get this question correctly. Give me 1 second. So finding spaces like Made of Millions, which focuses on mental health, but also taking into account and understanding the impact of spiritual health as well as physical health. So how do we find spaces like that? Or maybe how do we create spaces like that? If anybody wants to speak on that.
Yeah, I think, I wanted to kind of get to that question by going back to talk about like those labels, the heuristics. There's an aspect to which that's negative, but also on the flip side, behind the labels quite often is culture. That's real. That's not like a socially enforced construct. It's actually something that people that they use to define themselves and their humanity. And so I think, as a part of that, I think we have to give honor to Black Muslims who've also been a part of the Black tradition, the Black people in Haiti who were practitioners of Vodun, who carried out the Haitian Revolution that inspired the Denmark Vesey's, the Gabriel Prospers, the Nat Turners, the Black people in New Orleans during their uprising as well, I believe in 1811. Black Pan-Africanists who've helped sort of, push the thinking around what Blackness is and who we are in connection to our brothers and sisters globally. So I think, culture then, if we encapsulate that in our discussion, I think what we find is, at least in the Black experience, there are many different types of Black people who are bringing something to the table. Black immigrants from the Caribbean, DJ Kool Herc, who helped start hip hop, Stokely Carmichael, who's born in Trinidad, who was one of the greatest Black freedom fighters, both in the civil rights movement and then coining literally the Black Power phrase to kick off the Black Power movement, him and Willie Ricks. So I think, there are different ways, if we want to talk about spiritual health, I think there are different traditions that Black people have used. We've Vodun, traditional African spiritualities, Christianity, Islam. A lot of Black people are looking at New Age and perhaps Buddhism, but I think, so spirituality, and when you look at any of those, Black people are putting their twist on it. Like, it's not like, the colonizers brought Islam and Christianity to Africa. Black people have been putting their twist on those to say, nah, we're not with that colonizing aspect. Many of us, we with the liberating aspect, or, we're holding on to the traditional African religion and maybe ensconcing it in Roman Catholicism. So you end up with Santeria, looking at that global context. So I think, the way that Black people have, again, made a way out of no way and have syncretized what we've received from our oppressors with what we know to be true from our own indigenous experience and created a Creole spiritual system that works for us. I think, again, that speaks to the innovation, the creativity of Black people in this world to actually offer a witness to how we will not let oppression keep us down.
Absolutely. You're right. And I think for me, knowing that throughout my life and knowing, like you said, how Black people have made a way out of no way, I often wonder if, when we talk about activism and being activated, I always wonder if so much of our activation is, as the African diaspora in particular, is because of all these attacks against our humanity. I genuinely wonder that if we take the idea of creating a diamond, a coal out of diamond, and the pressure. So the pressure is what turns a coal into a diamond, and because of the constant pressure that Black people have been under. That is why you see so many diamonds shine. And then on the converse, is it because of that lack of pressure that so many white people, not everybody, but so many white people seeing almost rudimentary, almost like intellectually and spiritually rudimentary in how they approach the world? So it's almost like, was all the oppression we've dealt with good for us in the long run? I mean, the tale is yet to be completely told, but I have pondered that for so long, and just the way that Black people and people of color, because of their challenges, are able to grasp again the moral witness, Katrina, is just exactly what you said. But whether it's as an academic, whether it's as an artist, whether it's as a person in the faith community, we have always looked for more, tried to grasp more. It's like, it's not just surface level, it's so much deeper than that. Is that because of the pressure that we have and continuously face as a result of oppression that we have faced through so much of our history?
The short answer for me is absolutely. I think there's just something about the human experience that does not learn creativity and how to get better without pressure. Mm-hmm. Right? Without trials, without adversity. I don't think with our human condition, it is possible to be a better somebody without adversity. I think that's really the bottom line. And again, from the Christian faith tradition, for us, that starts, back in the Garden of Eden and the disobedience of humanity, right? And that everything heretofore has been a result of that. Yet, as sovereign as God is, he has not left us without the responsibility to activate, right? Without the responsibility to do what we need to do one for another, or to be what he's actually created and called us to be. You know what I'm saying? So whatever your faith tradition might be, whatever you think the causality is, we've seen in our short times of living on this earth that adversity pushed people to be better. Look at how many nonprofit organizations you get, right? Or how many causes are initiated or ignited and better other people's lives because the founder went through some sort of pain or trauma. And they don't wish that for anybody else. And so they activate other people. Like, look, the Black Lives Matter movement, you pointed to this earlier, David, in its current iteration. In the current iteration, whether you belong to the organization or you just kind of like sign on to the hashtag, it is a racially and ethnically diverse number of people engaging. Why? Because they said human to human, that's not right. The existential threat of state sanctioned violence is immoral, unethical, and illegal. And so they took a stand, human to human, heart to heart, soul to soul. So I think that it's my short answer is yes, but my explanation was a little longer.
It made all the sense in the world. It made all the sense in the world, and that's what I've said about 2020. 2020 was, I get this from my mother, so I give her all the credit. If we go specifically to George Floyd, and it's interesting the juxtaposition of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, because just look at kind of the timeline in which they happened, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but by the time George Floyd's lynching, and I do say lynching, happened, the United States and the world were still enough where they had to take it all in. And you see that juxtaposition with Ahmaud Arbery, which was only like maybe a month prior?
Maybe 6 weeks at most.
6 weeks prior, right? So 6 weeks prior, we see that lynching, and we see how that played out, but it didn't resonate as much as George Floyd's did. And I think it's the combination of the stillness that COVID-19, our microscopic terrorists, brought upon us. And then I think also, thinking as a storyteller, the length of the story of this man's lynching. So 8 minutes, 46 seconds. There's going to be a lot of people that never forget that time frame. 8 minutes, 46 seconds, where so many doubts were erased. Oh, maybe he did this. No. Maybe it was because as time went on, there was no way that you could reasonably justify beyond this was an act of hate, or certainly anti-Blackness, which I think is now more than ever is what we're seeing, even with results that we're still waiting to hear about. just how deep anti-blackness has become, or certainly pro-whiteness. And maybe I'll say that pro-whiteness as opposed to, because it's not just anti-blackness, but certainly pro-whiteness is. So going back to this concept of the pressure bringing out the best of us, I have said this before, it would be easy for us as people of color to take all the power and do to white people what they did to us. That would be easy, you know. But is that the way that we want, thinking about our humanity, to initiate enough pressure so that they see the best in themselves and not just us?
Well, I mean, I want to challenge the notion that pressure brings out the best, because I think it often leads to the thinking of like resilience being and grit and all these sort of adjectives that we use to say, look how graceful they are under pressure. And my thing in public health, we believe in prevention.
Right. That's true.
Why do I need to fight the disease if I can never have the disease in the first place? I mean, so does pressure induce trigger a response that unleashes human creativity? Yes. But is it the best mechanism for reaching human potential? I don't think so. I mean, I think if you look at Black world history and you look at where Black people are today, and you compare that to the Nile Valley civilizations in Kush, Kemet, and the awesome technological and moral advances that people made in the Nile Valley 6,000 years ago, I don't think we're better off, because I don't think this pressure of living in a capitalist America where we're living in hyper segregated cities and red line communities, many of us, where homicides are raging, where lead poisoning is poisoning our babies, where gender violence is hurting our women and LGBT community. I don't think we're better than we were at a point where we had the ability to have power, to define our realities, and to control the means of production, to cultivate agriculture, to build housing, to build cities, to build neighborhoods, to make Black lives matter in reality and not just in protest. So I guess I think when thinking on the level of cosmic time and thinking about Black history in its totality, I question the notion that we're somehow better off living in this capitalist environment. I don't think it makes us better. I think we're forced to adapt. We're forced to make a way out of no way. We're forced to become the Afrofuturists, to imagine a place where we're beyond all of this. But I think right now we're still in the valley of death.
And we will fear no evil. Just,
once we figure it out.
but listen, I don't think it's a matter of good, better, or best. I think it's a matter of how do you adjust to make it something that everybody around you can contribute to at some points when taking the opportunities, and to shift the nation and to shift the economy and to shift the politics of it all. And to me, that is the promise of the moment we're in. Right? Is we have an opportunity. We have really showed up for this past election. Now it's a matter of leveraging that power and making it something, to your point, Lawrence, where we don't settle for we're, quote, better off. You know, people have asked John Lewis, are we better off? Aren't we better than what we were? And one of the responses I heard him say is, he said, I will not say we did not make progress, but we have so much further to go. He also mentioned that in his posthumous op-ed piece in the New York Times, that simply said, don't grow weary and don't settle on your laurels. We still have work to do. So is it a matter of good, better, best? No. I think it's a matter of not resting on our laurels and understanding that, like MLK said, Martin Luther King Jr. said, until everybody's free, none of us are free. Until everybody has justice, no one has justice. And that's the fight of it. In terms of resilience, I do think individually there's a level of resilience that is obtained by going through certain struggles. Frederick Douglass said it like this, Lawrence and David: if there is no struggle, there is no progress, right? No one yields authority or power by you saying, please, ma'am, please, sir, give me authority of power. He said it comes with having been demanded. And he said it never has been that way and it never will be that way. That you have to push against the winds in order to lift your community. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for adversity. And again, not a matter of good, better, best, but adversity does get humanity where it needs to be together.
I mean, I grew up in a Christian tradition, so I think if we put the nail on the head, we're getting at this notion of redemptive suffering, that suffering has redemptive value. And I think that's a slippery slope, because then you say, well, slavery had value, being abused by your intimate partner has value. Like, no, suffering in and of itself does not have like intrinsic value. People may push back, people may rise up, and that's beautiful. But do you need suffering to reach human potential? I more and more, I fundamentally begin to sort of reject like lauding redemptive suffering. I think what it is that we struggle against as human beings on this planet is, how do we understand nature? How do we understand the environments that we're in so that we're not killed by hurricanes and natural disasters and wild animals? The struggle is to understand with science and faith, spirituality, the world that we're in, so that we can live in balance with nature and each other. And I think with that knowledge comes power. Power is what it is that allows us to grow, which is what allows us to thrive. You don't have to have suffering to grow. You need power to grow. And I think that's the human condition, is how do we get power, Black power, if you're in America, but how do we get power as a people, shared power, so that we're not fighting each other and killing each other? How do we get to a point of equitable power so that everyone has what they need and they're able to have a voice in a democratic way, in a deeply democratic way, to live fully as human beings on this planet in a mutual sister and brotherhood? I think that's what I look at as more and more as the real nature of the human condition, not redemptive suffering.
Yeah.
But
no, I hear you.
Yeah, I get.
I think that what I'm not suggesting redemptive suffering at all. I am just simply saying that because of the human condition, suffering is inevitable. That is all I'm saying. Because of the human condition from the beginning, to access power, you have to kick against the pricks, right? Whoever accessed power in this country, if you were not Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, John Quincy Adams, and you didn't have to kick against the pricks. And even then, it's given crumb by crumb, and in such a way that suggests that without struggling continuously, you'll never achieve access to power that is helpful for yourself individually, for your family, and for your community. You asked the right questions, Lawrence. I love your questions. I think that we probably just differ on the root of things, but the questions I think are the same. And I wonder past 2020, 2021, 2022, and so on, how many people have lifted their hearts to say, we want to answer those questions. We want to look at the comorbidities of COVID and make a difference in our neighborhood, so that should in another 100 years, another microscopic terrorist come, we're not on the death block as much as we were this time. So great questions. I really enjoyed them. So I'm going to stop talking.
Yeah, and I and hearing you both talk, and I understand both perspectives. It reminds me of the Adinkra symbol Sankofa, and this was an Adinkra symbol that I've known for most of my life, particularly because of the Sankofa Dance Theater. So we said it all the time. But it's about reaching back to move forward. And Lawrence, almost what you're suggesting is reaching back to move forward, to move back to where we once were. And I think that's the historical connection. And much of what I know is because I learned at a young age, not just where we were within this country, but where we used to be and still are to an extent on the continent of Africa. So when you hear about pharaohs, when you hear about kings and queens, when you hear about chiefs, when you hear about scientists and griots and philosophers and technologists, all those type of things, I think almost kind of the heart of the Afrofuturism, so to speak, is a reminder of, yeah, there was a time where people like you and me with hair like you and me had thoughts where we were pushing the capabilities of humanity. And maybe this iteration of us have been separated and divorced from that because of these circumstances, which no, they are at the basic level unjust, no doubt. And yet still, and I think that's so much of the story of Africans in America, and still look at all the beauty that we've created. You know, looking at the timeline of Africans in America, it's only been 400 years. That's a blip of time. And yes, as you said, Katrina, there's so much that we have left to do. So much of our Afrofuturism or Afro, I don't know, what's pastism that we want to bring to the future, because that's almost the best of us has happened, and we can get back to there again. Sankofa, there are these challenges, there are these pressures that we will face. We will face pressure as humanity anyway, and let's not act as if ancient Africa was perfect. It was great. Wasn't perfect. So humanity is present even there in our Afro-pastism and futurism. But how do we mitigate and ultimately eliminate these external pressures that we are experiencing because of our placement in this country or placement around the world? Let's not act like this is unique to the US. And that's what we've seen in 2022 is a lot of people have been activated around the world in their explicit pushback against oppression, however it looks where they may be. So all of that to say, when we think about mental health, to bring it back to why we're here, these are the thoughts and these are the feelings that we as activists, seasoned activists, navigate on a daily basis, whether we're talking to ourselves or talking with colleagues. So for those who are new to the game, so to speak, just a reminder of how to begin navigating those thoughts so that you don't get lost in it. So I think of the virtue detachment, and I looked at that on November 3rd, telling myself, no matter how this election goes, I can be, of the world, but not in it. Well, in the world, but not of the world. Hopefully I'm getting that correctly. So knowing that, yes, the world will have its effect on me undoubtedly because I'm in the world, but there is the effect that I have on myself because of my faith, because of my family, because of my strive for something greater that can keep me grounded so that the world doesn't completely consume me. So as we close out, because we're hitting 1 o'clock Eastern time, so we want to be mindful of your time and everyone else's time. So as we close, with all the things that we've discussed, and this is exactly what I knew was going to happen. I'm so glad it happened. This was not just about mental health, but about so many other things that people are contemplating as we take this new journey and take it certainly in a new perspective. How do we continue to keep ourselves grounded so that Lawrence is still able to have the best life he can have, and Katrina is able to have the best life she can have, and David is able to have the best life that he can have for himself, for herself, for their families, while still giving so much of themselves as is necessary so that humanity can be the best version of themselves.
Lawrence, I yield to you.
Well, I mean, I'd like to say, first of all, I live by myself. So, having a chance to talk to people and actually, bandy about the philosophical, deep issues of our day is actually very cathartic. So,
well, there you go. Talk to people. Talk to other people.
So I think that, the questions of power, the questions of suffering are central to mental health. This isn't like, they're tangential. Actually, if you don't have power, you're more likely to have anxiety. You're more likely to have stress. You're more likely to have all the comorbidities. You're more likely to have COVID. So power is very central, as is suffering. If you're suffering, you're experiencing anxiety and depression and all these other comorbidities from a mental health perspective. So for me, I think, this is a supremely wonderful way of saying that, power for me then is actually what really matters. Shared power, equitable power, ultimately is, I think, where we need to go. And I think the way to get there is with is with knowledge, science, and then where science can't take you, you need faith to take you the rest of the way. Where you don't want to get caught is in superstition, because then you end up with what Prophet Stevie Wonder said: when you believe in things that you don't understand, then you suffer. Superstition ain't the way.
Yes, Lord.
There it is. There it is.
Prophet Stevie Wonder, huh? You can truly see.
Right. No,
You saw that
absolutely.
thing. So
Absolutely.
For me, Adam Clayton Powell Jr. said it this way: keep the faith, baby. Keep the faith. And I do believe in science and technology, but I believe in science and technology, and I'm woke because of my faith, right? I mean, there was a wonderful book by Dr. Aubrey Hendricks that inspired me in terms of my involvement around the time George Floyd was murdered. And it's called The Politics of Jesus and the Aspects of Him That People Don't Want You to Know. And he proof texted so much scripture about how Jesus moved in this world. And it was very much in line with the way Gabriel Prosser moved, and so many of them did. So again, I'll end with Adam Clayton Powell Jr.'s keep the faith, baby, right? And that on a large level of what we need to even envision a future for ourselves and our communities is faith. And we have to walk by faith and not by what we see. And I think that God has gifted us to be able to do that, and also given us a great heart to include other people in that forward move. So many Jews were involved in the civil rights movement. So many Jews and white people donated to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and so many of our organizations. I mean, we just have this thing, I think, that God gave us to bring people together in a way that was unforeseen, but yet I think very much predestined. So that's how I feel about moving forward in terms of keeping my own sanity in these times. My friends and family have been everything. David, talking with you and a lot of our folks from the Aspen Institute experience has been quite moving and helpful. And just keeping that connection with people helps me to keep the faith too.
Yeah, no doubt. And I agree wholeheartedly. And that's why I knew I wanted to have you both here, because you are part of my circle that keeps me sane, where I can have these necessary conversations. And one of the things I appreciate is that there are many conversations that I need to have. I need to have conversations with my wife. They're not going to be the same as the conversations I have with you both. I need to have conversations with my son. It's not the same. So there are these different levels of my humanity that through telling my story, I remain grounded. And like you said, Lawrence, to be able to talk on this level is also necessary to make sure I remain grounded and focused on what's most important. And I think that, through the work that I do and certainly what I've experienced as a human being, at the end of the day, I just want to be happy. and I think no matter how I shape my research, my practice, my activism, policy, whatever the case may be, that's going to be the central focus of anything. Is I want to be happy and I want others to be happy, and those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. Nothing has to be taken away from somebody else for me to be happy. I've proven that already. Why can't everybody else have that chance too? So I think that's helped my activism more than anything else. Nothing that I've read, and they're beautiful, and I see that people are asking for books. So Katrina and Lawrence, are there any books that you want to recommend to people? Put them in the comments so they can do that. Also, ways that people can keep in touch with you via social media. So I've seen that as well. But again, any of the stories that I share of my life are going to wrap around that core principle, core reality. So whether it was the Sankofa Dance Theater, the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum, Mary Carter Smith, Yamalis Diaz, all these people that are important to me, they gave me avenues by which ultimately I could be happy. And that I can help others be happy too, because making others happy makes me happy. So we all are examples of how giving of ourselves to others can make them happy, but also make us happy as well. And I think as long as that remains our core guide, via the faith, via the science, via our own, intuition, our own drive, we'll get there. And again, look how far we've gotten and look how much far we have to go. So like you say, keep the faith and rely on what has guided us here, from an existential level, from a spiritual level, from a from an alien level, whatever the case may be. We've been guided to this point to do exactly what we're meant to do. Everything is as it should be, because ultimately it's going to get us to a place that we want to go. And we may not see it all. And I think that helps my mental health too. I'm not going to see everything that I've worked for in my lifetime. I can accept that. But I've seen enough already, and I will continue to see things the more that I give of myself to that cause. And that alone makes it worth it.
David,
So
right on.
I try my best. So with that, we thank you all for joining us at this time. Thank you for looking away from the election for at least an hour and then going right back to it as soon as it's over, because I will do that. I just need to see what happened. But anyway,
David, are you going to pass the plate?
Am I going to pass the plate? See, my church wouldn't do that. My church is going to be self-sustaining, so I don't need your tithes. Like, I know y'all got bills to pay. See, we didn't have enough time to get into that, Katrina, because I could talk about that for days.
It sounds like we need another StreamYard.
Oh, we're gonna have to do this again. Don't worry. But no complexion plates this time. Keep your change. Take care of your bills. Have a nice lunch. We can do it next time.
Thank you, David. Lawrence, looking forward to doing it again.
Absolutely.
And again, remember, before y'all go, remember to put your information if you want people to keep in touch with you. Lawrence, definitely for your book, and for all the work that you're doing. Katrina, same thing. Make sure people can stay in touch with you. Please stay in touch with us. We want to hear about what you're doing. And with that, we'll say thank you. Have a great one. Take care of your minds, take care of your bodies, take care of your spirits, and keep up the fight. Peace.